Hello and welcome to my channel, Act on Mental Health. My name is Sean and I'm a licensed mental health counselor here in the state of Indiana. Now this channel is my attempt to make acceptance and commitment therapy and relational frame theory more accessible for everybody. I enjoy making these videos each week and I hope that they're helpful to you. Now let's talk about something that we can all relate to, grocery shopping. In 2020, during the pandemic, my wife was pregnant with our third child and she was just not in a position to go out shopping. And so we tried the online orders that you could just go pick up, but they always seemed to miss something. And so she got desperate and she sent me out to the store a couple times. And what she did, I thought was phenomenal because she knows that I'm very forgetful, that I have a rule that, I can remember 3 things and that's it. Don't expect you to remember the 4th thing. And I have to write things down. And so when I would be sent out to the store, I'd often come back with missing items or things that weren't what she requested. They were kind of in that category, but not quite the item that she wanted. And so when she sent me out during this pandemic, it was very intimidating for me. It took me a lot longer than her. She would get done in an hour and it took me 2 hours. But what she did, which was really phenomenal, is she used this app from the store that where she could put her list in. And as I was going through the store, it had a picture of the item, and then it had the section and the aisle, and even where it was on the shelves. And so there was like no chance that I could mess this up. And so when I returned with all the items she requested, she gave me a big thumbs up, and I felt really proud of myself. Now, how does this relate to therapy and how does this relate to our topic of metaphor creation? Well, just like picking the right metaphor for a client, sometimes we can be way, way off. Imagine that you're in a grocery store that's unfamiliar to you. You haven't stopped there before. Maybe you're in town and you have to go to it. And you think that this store is just like the rest of the chains and that everything's going to be in the exact same place. But you go in there and things are not. And so it's a slow and difficult process to try to navigate this store and pick out those items that you have on your list. Well, like that, metaphors can be something that could be unfamiliar to us as we have a client that we're getting to know and trying to understand how they connect with metaphors, how they use them. And so today I'm going to help you out and try to give you that screenshot of what the picture is, where the section is, and what aisle, and even what shelf that these metaphors are on, so that you can seamlessly pull them out and use them in therapy. So whether you're deepening your practice or just beginning to explore the world of ACT and RFT, there's something here for you today. Let's quickly revisit the essential ideas we've covered so far in this series, laying the groundwork for today's focus. Now, in our introduction video, we learned about the idea of source and target for metaphor creation. The source is essentially the imagery or concept we draw upon. It's familiar, it's tangible, it's something we can all recognize. The target, on the other hand, is the experience or feeling we aim to influence through a metaphor. The strength of a metaphor lies in how vividly the source can shine a light on the target, making the unseen seen and the complex simple. Moving to our second video, we walk through the process of a functional analysis, or as I like to think of it, the ABCs of behavior. We have the antecedent, the behavior itself, and the consequences. And these help us to uncover the rich context of a behavior. This detective work is key because it helps us pinpoint the experience and emotions in our clients' lives that are ready for a well-placed metaphor. Successful metaphor creation hinges on our ability to match a relatable source with a relevant target, which are discoverable through the ABCs of a functional analysis. This method ensures that our metaphors are not just creatively entertaining, but deeply resonant with the actual lived experience of our clients. As a graduate student, I became very interested in some of the philosophy behind ACT and RFT, which led me to read from all sorts of authors that I was unfamiliar with. Niklas Törneke is well known in the ACT community, but linguists like George Lakoff and philosopher Mark Johnson are lesser known, yet they're often cited by these ACT and RFT authors. All that to say, I read a few books on metaphors that help shape my understanding and use of metaphors in therapy. There's two books that I want to mention by George Lakoff that really help us in understanding metaphors. There's Philosophy in the Flesh, The Embodied Mind in Its Challenge to Western Thought, and his second book, Metaphors We Live By, which he wrote with philosopher Mark Johnson. Now, these explore how our understanding of conceptual systems are fundamentally shaped by the sensory and motor functions of our body. Now, all that to say is we basically make sense of our world by our bodily experiences of it. So that includes our orientation, our sense of space, our sense of working with things and comparing them with other things. A big part of Lakoff's research was identifying primary metaphors that we use without even realizing it, as if they're deeply embedded in our conceptual framework. These include affection as warmth, the association between physical warmth and emotional warmth. For example, a warm smile. Or how about this one? Important is big. Now, this is the significance or importance that is often conceptualized as size. And, like somebody might say, a big decision. Another one is understanding is seeing. Comprehension is often talked about in terms of sight, like I see what you mean, or I see what you did there. And then there's time is money. This reflects how we talk about time in terms of a valuable commodity, such as saving time or wasting time. Now, we'll get into a few more of these in the next section, but for now, this will be an appetizer. Primary metaphors help us to conceptualize our world through words so that others can know our internal hidden experiences through sensations that we all experience with our bodies. Lakoff argues that these metaphors are not just an aspect of language, but are grounded in our bodily experiences. For example, our understanding of affection might be linked to the physical warmth we experience through physical closeness with a loved one. This implies that concepts that we experience with our bodies help us to understand and communicate more abstract concepts like stress, relationships, progress. This means that our ability to think abstractly, reason, and even our use of language is fundamentally shaped by the kinds of bodies that we have and the ways that we interact with our environment. This approach has profound implications for understanding language, thought, and even the nature of human cognition itself. It suggests that to fully understand human thought and language, we need to consider the embodied experiences as central to our cognition. Primary metaphors are like entering a Walmart store. You've been to a dozen of them in your life, and they're all pretty much the same. You walk into the store and you see familiar signs posted around the store that tell you which section to find things in. So we could go to electronics in the back, go to home decor over here to the right, or go to the toys that are way, way back to the right. Or we could go to the groceries to the left, or clothing that's just right there in front of us. These signs help us to know which sections we need to go to. When someone uses a primary metaphor, we immediately recognize the section of the store that they are in. So let's look at 5 primary metaphors and how they're used by clients. Number 1 is love is a journey. This is often one that's said in a therapy setting. So this metaphor describes a relationship, which would be the source, as a journey, which would be the target, with expressions like, we've come a long way, we're at a crossroads, or we're moving in different directions. Now, this informs the therapist that we're really talking about navigation here. We're talking about some decisions that need to be made. And we're also talking about maybe a map that a person or persons have on what. The second primary metaphor that often comes up in clients is life is a journey. Now, this is similar to relationships, but instead it's used for progress. So they'll say something like, I can't just move on yet, or I'm stuck, or I don't know what my next step is. And so life, which is the source, is viewed as progress, which would be the target or lack thereof. The third is argument is war. Now, this doesn't come up as argument is war, but what we're really talking about here is communication. See, communication is viewed as a battle to be won or lost, where we attack the other's position and defend our own. And so as a therapist, we can see them actually start to get into a battle or conflict or war and begin to know that they're looking to win, they're looking to attack or defend. The fourth primary metaphor that often comes up is mind as a machine. So the mind, which would be the source, is viewed as a machine, which would be the target, with parts that should work together, where we can process information and we should be able to just get along in life just fine. But sometimes we find ourselves breaking down under the stress. Or a client may say, I'm broken, or I think there's something wrong with me. And they're looking for a diagnosis, they're looking for treatment, they're looking for the therapist to do something. And this tells us that they're looking at themselves like a machine, and they're looking at how that they can fix it. The fifth primary metaphor that often comes up is health is wealth. So phrases like, he's in poor health, or I need to invest in my health, shows the use of health as the source and the importance placed on wealth, which would be the target. They want more of it, not less of it. Now, there's several more primary metaphors commonly used, but hopefully you're beginning to see how language is metaphorical with or without our awareness. Now that we know the section of the store to look, let's consider the aisle by looking at the emotional metaphors used by clients. In many classrooms and counseling rooms, an emotional wheel is shown that includes core emotions like fear, sadness, calm, happy, anger, and love. And then the wheel shows all sorts of feeling words that are possible within these core emotions. With all of these feeling words as possible sources, how do we know which target metaphors apply? In other words, what aisle is the core emotion and which shelf is it located on? This is where emotional metaphors spill out of a client's heart and become accessible for exploration and transformation. A primary emotional metaphor is emotions as forces, where emotions are expressed as burning with anger, boiling over with frustration, swept away by sadness, a tidal wave of grief, weighed down by stress, fell in love. Natural forces such as gravity, storms, and waves possess power, uncontrollability, and the ability to change landscapes. These forces act upon objects, influencing or changing their state without the object's consent or control. A client isn't just relaying an emotional experience, but something they cannot articulate with words, so they use metaphors. Metaphors have the capacity to highlight or hide meaning. For example, if I use a metaphor like burning with anger, I am highlighting the intensity of emotional anger, but I'm also hiding other aspects of my emotional experiences, such as hurt, sadness, love, so that the therapist pays attention to the intensity of the anger and not focus on the sense of loss that I've experienced. This isn't consciously chosen by the client. It's how metaphors are used in language. So in this emotional metaphor, emotions are seen as the source, and the target would be forces. So a client may not be thinking forces, but they'll think about something within that section and say, okay, well, it's kind of like I'm burning with anger. And so these are all conceptualized through this lens of natural forces. And natural forces, when we think about them, they're pretty powerful and they're uncontrollable. And so in a way, they're communicating to the therapist that their emotions, they affect them powerfully and often uncontrollably, changing their internal landscapes and states of being, much like how a storm can alter a physical landscape. Now, another part of this is the bodily basis for this metaphor, which lies in our physical experiences of being acted upon by these forces, whether that's being pushed by the wind or pulled by gravity. We connect with these physical sensations to describe how we are moved or overwhelmed by our emotions, grounding our experiences of emotional experiences in our bodily experiences with physical forces. It's kind of like the expression that my emotions are a roller coaster right now. Well, if you've been on a roller coaster, you know what that physical sensation and that experience is like and what your body goes through. And so it helps us to give a whole new meaning to these emotions and what it's like for the client. Metaphors are not just simply words, but they are words that create worlds of meaning. Clients talk in metaphors that highlight emotional experiences and at the same time hide other emotional experiences. And while we understand metaphors in everyday language, we sometimes miss the meaning within them. By learning to identify primary, conceptual, and emotional metaphors, we can find our way through the store, to the section, to the aisle, and reach out and grab the best metaphor in creating change. And that's exactly what we'll discuss in our final episode in this series, how to catch, create, and co-create metaphors that change lives. If you found this video helpful, return the favor and help out this channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing to Act on Mental Health. By doing so, you help this content to reach others who, like you and I, are learning ACT and RFT. As always, remember that your journey towards a more purposeful and mindful life begins with a single click.